Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Professional Genealogist Reacts live stream where I'm going to be answering genealogy and DNA questions, mostly from my Reddit, but also probably some from chat. Getting started a little bit later today, although the US has already done the daylight savings time. So for the rest of the world, this is actually kind of normal time. So let me see if I can, my background, I'm getting a little too faded. Is that better? Oh, no. There we go. I think that'll be good. That'll be good. So, and for everyone who's newer to the stream, I have a map behind me, an older map. If you can figure out where it is, I think this one kind of the giveaway. There's always a connection to all the maps behind me in the in my family ancestry. So, all right, let's go through the hellos. I kind of have had a crazy day doing different things, and so I haven't even gotten to see what people have been saying so far. So let's see. Oh, we got Stephen Millsap here. Wonderful, my friend. How are you? I'm doing well. I hope you are as well, Stephen. I had several DNA surprises. My grandma was adopted, so we tried to find biological family. I had my half-aunt tested. Surprise, her and I aren't related. Next. Oh, and next one. There's the next one. All right, well, let's jump. Let's see. I adopted my wife's two sons she had before me. DNA tested them, two different fathers. Both of their fathers weren't who they thought they were. Wow. So interesting. Interesting. Let's see. We have Ruth here. Since my 92-year-old mom and I tested, we have had two people contact us that matched. They were given up for adoption and searching. One turned out to be a niece of my mom's through her mother. Oh, very cool. That's always fun to find different relatives through DNA testing. Edgar, hey, I was just wondering how you would interpret my heritage results that include 3% Finnish, 1% Inuit, and 1% Native American. Well, that's not enough information to really be able to figure anything out, because to interpret the results, we need to have the whole thing. And usually it's best to also get an idea from you of what do you know about your ancestry, because sometimes it's just a matter of looking at the historical population flow, whether it be for the past few thousand years, but most importantly for the past 500 to 600 years, and see, is there a strong connection between what you know of your family and what else? Okay, let's see. Stig is here. Wonderful to see you, Stig. I also have 1% Inuit from my heritage. In my case, it's clearly a misreading of Sami. And I remember there was a video I did before I did all of these as live reactions. I did these videos answering the Reddit questions, and there were a couple, or one about Sami ancestry in Finland, and I'd never heard of it before. Then I learned a little bit about it, and that was one of the things I think I heard from a few people with that ancestry, was that they were getting Inuit. So that could certainly be something. We have Leslie here coming in from Santa Cruz, California, showing up to the party. Thanks, Leslie, for joining. I do see it, Ruth. It looks like you had like a whole lot of conversation about something with what was going on. Let's see. My cousins, my sister, and a couple others are getting small percentage of BAS. Does that mean it is there? If it is showing up in several of us, we have no knowledge of BAS. No, it could just be that the DNA, especially if you're all DNA testing through the same company. So if you're all DNA testing through MyHeritage just may have a difficulty in reading certain DNA, and you all share that DNA, that it's just like, oh, well, we think it's Basque, but maybe it's something else. Anna Tommaso from Western New York. Wonderful to have you. Another one of the common audience members. We have Weeping Scorpion, another one coming in from the Faroe Islands. And Stig, obviously, coming from Oslo, Norway. We have one of our wonderful mods, Charlie, here. Evening, Charlie, who actually beat me in posting about the live stream today on Discord. So always awesome to have mods and admins who are absolutely amazing. Charlie being one of them, as well as Matt and Blackberry Rose, who I think I saw Matt was in here. But yeah. Oh, and Ruth, you're from Canada. Wonderful to have you. We have Hella Mark from France, Germany. So I guess, are you coming in from like the Alsace-Lorraine sort of area? Western Germany, Eastern France, I guess. Stephen, I am meaning their fathers had MPE for their fathers, not that my kids had MPE. Right, so you're adopted sons, but not your biological sons. So let's see. Anna, this is always wonderful to watch. I have an adopted brother from Paraguay who could care less, whereas I have done four different DNA kits. Yeah, I mean, that's how it is. Sometimes you'll be so interested in it, and others in the family are like, I couldn't care less. I don't care. Okay, Natalie D, will this be live? Yep, this is live. I'm alive and doing this right now. So wonderful to have you here. Mandalore Parr from Nebraska, wonderful to have you. Let's see. We have some more hellos. Carol Suniga, hello. We have Camo Jan coming in from Minnesota. Hello. Redheads, yes, redheads rock. Wonderful to have another ginger on the stream. We have Matt here, our wonderful admin mod. I always say this. I never remember which is which and what is what. You guys are the ones that actually help me out with that. Is so funny. Ruth, hit the like button. Thank you. Yes, definitely hit the like button. Alexandra coming in from Germany, Koblenz, Germany, if I remember correctly. So another one of our very common audience members. Wonderful to have you. Oh, Natalie D coming in from Illinois. Just found you, love. Wonderful. Glad you're enjoying this. And I actually used to live in Illinois. I lived in St. Charles, Illinois for a while. So, but I was a kid then. We have Debs Crockart. I don't think I ever remember how to pronounce it. I'm here. Wonderful to have you. Missed my first stream last time. No candy for me. Well, Maven, you're here now. Also, is the map Los Angeles again? Yes, it is. I didn't really have that much time before the stream. Like I mentioned, I was kind of doing other stuff. And so I had to choose one of the older ones. So I thought the LA map would be good, but it's already been figured out. So we'll have to see if people who join later maybe figure it out as well. Charlie, thank you for the emoji. We have Sharon Phillips coming in from New York. We have Karma coming in from Nebraska, who actually, okay, I won't mention that. I'll let her mention if she wants to mention anything. So let's see, Natalie, DNA helped decipher the sense of two men with the exact same name got mixed up by the government after the Civil War, while all having to GED match it. My dad did it, so we know now. One of the beautiful things about DNA testing, and especially a common occurrence in genealogy, although obviously outside of genealogy, when people have to figure out who people are, people with the same name, especially if they're around a similar age, often get confused, especially for people that do very quick and dirty family trees where they just build it and they're like, oh, Jenny Epstein must be the same person. And that happened to my family tree on Family Search. Apparently 2 years ago, someone thought my grandmother, Jenny Epstein, was some other Jenny Epstein who died different years, different parents. Like so much that was different. There was nothing the same. They weren't even living in the same area, and someone merged it, and it was there for 2 years until I figured it out. When I went to Roots Tech, someone messaged me and said, hey, it looks like we're cousins. Would love to meet you. And I looked at it, and I was like, oh, unfortunately, we're actually not cousins. Someone did a bad merge, and so it looks like it. Gazillion PT coming in from Portugal, someone who's been a long-time watcher, a commenter on the channel. Wonderful to have you. And yes, Matt, wonderful for mentioning. For those who aren't familiar, I do have a Discord channel, which I'll go ahead and just share the Discord channel so everyone can kind of see it. But we have, I was about to share my Spotify. You can all see what it, but yeah, so we have a pretty active Discord channel. So if you've never been on Discord before, it's basically just kind of like a group of people who have similar interests. And this is based around me, which then means it's really based around genealogy. But it's definitely a really interesting place to be able to get help. We have a lot of requests, a lot of people helping. You can hear a lot of, yeah. I'm guessing that's people joining all of those beeps that you're hearing. If you're hearing them, I don't know. I thought I had the audio on, but definitely check that out. Really great place and a lot of amazing people, and really cool too in the fact that I have found that I think we're about at 300 members, close to it. And the large majority of people in the group are probably under 30, I'd say. I mean, we have a lot of kids in the high school, college, and early 20s age range, which is not common in genealogy. But it gives a really fun side of genealogy that you don't usually get from other stuff. We have Danger Girl 33 from Detroit. That's so funny seeing Danger Girl. I used to joke that I'd name my kids with the middle name Danger because then their last name, they'd be Danger Ross. And then that ended up being a nickname of mine in college because I used to make that joke. So I actually have some of my usernames for over the years for different things have been Danger Ross. So that's funny seeing Danger Girl. Now, family trees are all messed up on my family tree, my heritage. Yeah, one of the beauties of collaborative family trees like Genie, Family Search, and WikiTree is the fact that if you find errors, you can fix it. Whereas if you find someone's tree on MyHeritage or Ancestry or one of the private trees somewhere else, I don't think GenieNet's collaborative. I think GenieNet's private. I could be wrong. But basically, you find those incorrect things on non-collaborative trees. You have to hope that they'll correct it if you actually say something. Oh yeah, I was right. Koblenz, wonderful. We have 949 Sherry coming in from Southern California. We have Gran Esperanza coming in from Alabama. Wonderful to have you. Okay, my surname is pronounced Crowcart. Crowcart. Can you remember where I'm from? I don't remember where you're from. I'm so sorry. Let me know. I'll keep an eye out for it. Oh yeah, and Alexandra, I'm from Venezuela with Dominican heritage. Carmagal, well, I found a little more of my great-great-great-grandfather's BLI. That's a plus. Contact someone about him. She said she'd get back to me on Wednesday. Awesome. So yeah, working on that family. I saw some of the messages coming through Patreon from you. So good to see you were really getting a lot of stuff going on. Stephen Millsap, oh yeah, North Dakota represent farms for miles. Yeah. Okay. Let me click through just a few more, and then we really need to actually jump to the questions too. Gazillion PT, because lots of people of PT people in DE and your name totally PT compatible. Discord is the new IRC. We have a lot of alphabet soup going on here. Great-great-grandfather was Prussian, so the DNA is all over the map. Yeah, Baltic, yeah, you're going to get a lot of that Central European, Western European, and Eastern European when you have like literally Central European. Eric Sheridan coming in from Kansas City, Missouri. Wonderful to have you, Eric. Okay, let's see. Yeah, the family I was talking about the other night is a soap opera. Yeah, from what you told me with what was it? He was marrying his daughter-in-law or his stepdaughter or something like that. It was pretty okay. Deb's coming in from Bournemouth, UK. I'll forgive you. Okay, but I'll try to remember Bournemouth, UK. Laquita, how can I send you my ancestry information? So I don't really do private stuff. I've actually been considering whether or not I should start taking on private clients again. So right now I have there are two ways that you can get my help, really the main two ways. One being through these live streams, whether it's posting on my Reddit, which we're going to get into the Reddit questions in a second, or posting within the let's see, is that the right one? Yes, that's the right one. Or posting within the chat during these streams. When it comes to posting in the chat for questions for stuff, I can't guarantee I'll get to all of them. Chat does go fast sometimes, especially when we have a little bit more people. And obviously with trying to answer the questions, it's hard to get to them. But with super chats and super stickers, it makes it so I can actually see when someone does that, so I can guarantee that I can answer those. Plus, it's kind of, I guess, an appreciation for helping support the channel. I guarantee that if you do a super chat or super sticker, I will answer those. Doesn't mean I won't answer some of the non-super sticker stuff too. I just can't guarantee I'm going to be able to see it because sometimes I just don't. So, yeah, the other way is I do also have one-on-one consultation. So, Karma Gal, who was talking about other stuff, she is one of the people who does my one-on-one consultations through Patreon. So I have an option where you can get a half hour once a month or an hour once a month. I am considering other ways to allow people to have me do one-on-ones, and like I said, I'm considering possibly taking on private clients again. But at this point, don't send me ancestry stuff. I actually do get people who I'll get ancestry requests randomly of people like sending me their DNA and their trees and stuff. And it's like, if I even tried to answer everybody that emails me to say, hey, I'm sorry, I really don't have the time, I'd end up spending hours a day because I probably get at least 2 or 3 messages on each platform that I'm on, plus the email. So yeah, let's see. I should get to these questions. I've had some questions that I basically scoped out beforehand. And as usual, to kind of mention how I do this, first I go to the top questions of all time, and I'm looking for the questions that have been upvoted the most. So for the people that post their questions or that see a question on Reddit that they really like, for it to have a higher chance of being answered during a stream, needs to be upvoted. So especially if you see a question that you're like, oh, I'd love to see Jared answer that, upvote it. So we're getting some that are a mix of things. So we'll be answering this one, which is 27 days old. We'll be answering this one, which is 8 months old. This one, which is 8 months old. And then we might drum, we'll see how things are going. I'm going to try to keep this stream not too long today, but obviously we'll be answering some questions from chat too. So let's see. We did ask the question. I have Mississippi and South Carolina routes that I would like for you to react on. Okay, yeah, I mean, post it in the Reddit or something like that, and yeah, I can probably get to that. Okay. What are the chances that we will be able to narrow down tribes or at least regions in the future for Native American DNA? Always surprises me that 23andMe doesn't ask. I don't know. I think it's really going to depend on how well they're going to be able to actually get DNA studies done with Native American tribes, because a big issue is that a lot of tribes ban DNA. Like, they do not want people DNA testing. They don't want DNA testing done to try to identify stuff, in terms of Native American ancestry. And my understanding is part of it has to do with the political side of things, with tribal membership, and they don't want people to start trying to claim tribal membership and get their benefits and things because they claim this ancestry. And I think there's a bit more to that too, but that's what I understand is one of the bigger things for it. So I think it's certainly possible, but I don't know when, because there are a lot of people who do descend from Native American ancestry that aren't even part of these tribes, or I don't think all of the tribes feel the same way about that. So, I imagine there are some who have done it, but I think it really is going to vary. So yeah, unfortunately, don't know. Ironically, Sardonicles, wonderful to see you here, but you're no Sardonicles anymore. You're just Ironicles. Interesting. Okay, so let's get to these questions. As usual, I need to make it bigger so people can actually read it. So hopefully that's not going to be too small. So for our first question, half first cousin surprise. Hello. Last week I looked at matches on MyHeritage. I've tested on Ancestry and 23andMe and MyHeritage, and there was a half first cousin, which meant a grandfather had fathered this person's parent. I checked matches that we shared and saw that this person came through my mother's father. I sent a message, no response. I sent a more informative message, no response. I waited several days and sent a third message with even more information, and so far, no response. I was impatient and decided to Google this person and check on Facebook, and there it was. And there was a brother that I also looked at because the person would also have been a half first cousin. And there on his page was a photo of his father, who would have been my mother and aunt's half brother that they never knew about. So poster's half uncle, presumably. The photo was labeled my 94-year-old father. So I did the math and saw that my grandfather would have fathered this man in 1928 or 1929 and would have been a teenager, which leads me to believe that my grandfather likely never knew about this, and it seems the female was married and may not have known herself that it wasn't from her husband. I could see my grandfather in the old man's photo. Oh, wow. So one of the photos that you saw with the 94-year-old guy, so your half uncle, your grandfather's there. So technically a photo of your half uncle with his father. Interesting. I hesitate to push ahead with this, maybe waiting for the old man to pass and my aunt, who is 86. It could be upsetting for them to learn this so late in their lives. I want to do the right thing, but it's on my mind 24/7. How do you not go crazy when matches don't respond? Well, it's a little difficult. Let's see what some people say down here. It seems that you solved the mystery. Good work. I doubt you'd get any more information from your newfound cousin than you already know. You've given them plenty to think over. You just have to be patient. You have to be okay with knowing you may never get a response. Great sleuth work. Be patient. They might be shook over the MPE. Some DNA testers are just looking for ethnicity and then they're done. And my known did not mean to do that. My known second cousin, once removed, took a year and a half to notice my message. So yeah, pretty much agree with both of them. You just have to be patient. There's the possibility they may never respond. I have been someone who's taken it a bit further sometimes, especially with my idea of, one, maybe they just aren't logging in. I don't remember if you can go and see when someone last logged in, but on Ancestry, yeah, you just said matches on MyHeritage. But, if you find them on Ancestry, you can go and look at the profile and it gives you an idea, has it been a while since they've logged in? If you found them on Facebook, one thing you could consider, but you have to also understand it could be pushing the boundaries a bit too much, is possibly reaching out to other family members. You mentioned this DNA match has a brother, so another first half cousin of yours. Would it be worthwhile to just reach out to the brother? And, I've done that in the past. And when I do that, what I'll say is, I'll say, hello, I was a DNA match to this person. I sent them a few messages and they never responded. I wasn't sure if they just didn't log in. I found them I found you all on Facebook and I thought I'd try to reach out here. That's another option too, is just, if you have the DNA match on Facebook, you could also reach out to them. But like I said, consider that it could push some people too far. I've been someone who in my work, when I'm contacting my own relatives, my own family, I'm a little bit more forward than some people would be. So if I do find a match that isn't responding on the preferred, the platform we're matching on, and I find them elsewhere, I'll send them a message and I'll just kind of say, hey, I saw that you're a match of mine on this and I was hoping to connect, and I couldn't tell if you hadn't logged in or not. And so I thought I'd reach out here just in case you hadn't. But obviously if you have a way to tell that, okay, they probably read my message, then it's probably not a good idea to do that. But just keep in mind that, it is probably not going to be something that everyone is going to be cool about if you do that. But it is one way, because sometimes you may have family that are super into it and they just don't see the message. But if you want to play it the safest and especially, rustle the least amount of feathers, you've already sent 3 messages. Presuming that they have logged in and seen them, it is just a matter of being patient. Now, one thing I do want to say is that you didn't indicate anything to show that you didn't show anything to show that it was a super confident, yes, this is a, half uncle, because the main thing would be seeing the centimorgans and how that person's also matching your relatives. Now, you mentioned that you've done the research and all that, so I'm assuming that you've probably reached that point. But just for argument's sake, in case maybe you haven't, pulling up our shared centimorgan project, when we look at a half first cousin, which I think that's how they were coming out to, half first cousin. So when we look at a half first cousin, we're looking at someone who on average is sharing 449 centimorgans of DNA. So for those who don't know, a centimorgan is just a measurement of DNA. And so we use that to help decipher how close someone might be related to us. And with a half first cousin, we're getting this sort of a range. So when we look at that, we also want to see what other possibilities are there with that sort of a similar range. So we have 449 here, so that could be a half first cousin, but then it also could be a first cousin once removed. It also could be a first cousin once removed up here, but it could also be a great great aunt or uncle. And then it also could be a half great aunt or uncle. So you're looking at a few variations of the possibility, but that's just focusing on the average. So depending on how much you actually share with this person, that could change things. So let's say that maybe you actually share 550 centimorgans with this person, which, yeah, that puts first cousin once from, or sorry, half first cousin in the strong range, but you still have a lot of other possibilities. But even so, with a half first cousin, 600 is pretty fair within the main amount of cases. So it could get higher or could get lower. And when it gets lower, that gets even more interesting, because then it really opens up the possibility, because now we've got half first cousin isn't our strongest. Although I'm guessing part of why I'm saying that is that when I see people kind of come to conclusions where it says, and there was a half first cousin, that makes me question, are you going and analyzing it and being like, yes, that's a half first cousin? Or is that what MyHeritage said? We're guessing this is what they are. Because sometimes MyHeritage just says, this is what we're guessing what they are, and people kind of just say that's it. So I'm not negating that, you may have actually solved it, but based on the information that you've given us, it is just one small question of mine of, is it truly a half first cousin? Like, are you like that confident that you double checked all your stuff, or was it something that you just kind of saw that was one of the main options and was like, okay, that's probably what it's going to be? But obviously, if it is on the lower end, 300, we have a lot more options that are very possible. I mean, now we're looking at second cousins once removed, although, like I said, it's a very good idea when you do see these where it's, okay, it's kind of on the end of the range. Look at the histogram and see, well, how likely truly is it? Because if we see, it's falling in the range sort of, but at the edge of 0.6% of all cases. So very unlikely second cousin once removed, but just something I wanted to mention, because something to consider based on what they said. So I'm kind of saying that in the assumption that they're just going off of what they've said here, and there really wasn't much else that they've done with it. But they say, I checked matches that we shared and saw they came through my mother's father. This is on MyHeritage. So when they look at shared matches, you can see how much is your match matching your shared match. So they should be able to see how much their known relatives of their grandfather are matching this person. And then putting that into a what are the odds plot map, you can then figure out, okay, what is the most likely scenario? And it's very possible this person has already done all of that. But they didn't mention it here, so we don't know. So, all right. We're going to mark that one as reviewed. This question was reviewed during the professional Jimmy March 12th, 2024. Okay. Oh. Okay, so let's go back. Let me check the chat. Oh, wow, yeah, very chatty chat today. Okay. Oh, John Tyner, wonderful to see you here, coming in from Ireland, one of our wiki treers. Daniel, late again, but you're here, so that's good. Karma, I've tried messaging people, wish they would answer back. I have had only a few that ever have. I've kind of had non-actual data-based ideas of the percentage of responses I usually hear back. And I want to say that I usually hear back from probably about 20 to 30% within the first few days, maybe another 10% within the first week or two, and then 5% like after 2 weeks, which usually the ones after 2 weeks, it's usually like months or years later. In fact, I'll still get messages every once in a while from like a cousin I messaged back in like 2016 on Facebook. And they're like, I literally never log into Facebook. And I went in and I saw your message and here I am. That's funny. Shelby, we have an affair situation like that in our family. My dad's biological dad had daughters with his wife before and after the birth of my dad. So his wife never knew. The sisters want nothing to do with him. Nothing to do. John Tyner, I have a message on Ancestry from someone. I've been busy, so I haven't replied yet. Yeah, and one of the things for me is that for years I would try to respond to everybody, but obviously once I started to kind of hit a certain level on YouTube, I guess the messages started to get a little too much. Part of it being that not everyone messaging me was actually a relative, and it was a lot of people like, "Oh, I love your YouTube channel. Can you help me do this? Can you help me do that?" And it's like, I don't have the time. I'm sorry, I barely have time to research my own family. So part of why I came up with this whole Reddit thing was a way to give back to the community and answer some questions, because it's really hard to answer all of them. But it has gotten to the point where now I even do get messages from people who are definitely relatives where it's like, it's really hard to get back because I'm just so busy, and it's like I have to remember, like, oh yeah, I need to respond, and yeah, sometimes it just falls by the wayside. So yeah, sometimes you aren't the family they're looking to contact, and that is why they don't respond. Have a match that only wants to contact maternal lines. Interesting. I've never really run into that much, like in terms of someone that was like, oh, well, you're a cousin, but I'm not interested because I'm more interested in this line. I have had people that have been, kind of like, oh, very cool, nice to whatever, but, they don't really focus on any of the research of our shared line. They're just focused on other stuff. But interesting to know. Yeah, I'm bad about checking my accounts. I'll always get back, but sometimes it might take me months. And some of these websites don't have a good notification system, so it's hard to know when you even get a message. Like, I really hate the ones that they send you. They'll send you the message that, like, you've received a message, but they don't give you any part of the message in the email, which, I mean, I guess maybe that's a privacy thing, but I know I always like it when it's like, if I get a message on Genie, I can look at my notification email and it'll show me a good part of the message. So I can at least get an idea of, okay, do I actually want to go into log into Genie, go to this message and respond, or is it something where it's just not going to be worthwhile for the time to respond? So, yeah, hello, Mark. I have uncles and cousins in Washington, D.C., but I don't know them, and a cousin who was born in Alabama, but who came back to Germany as a child. And especially for bigger families, I feel it's not too uncommon to have decently close relatives that you just don't know. Let's see. I got a message from a DNA match saying, hiya, we are fifth cousins. I checked the match and she's a low confidence match. Yeah, that's one that also happens a lot when you DNA test a lot of places. And I guess coming from Jewish ancestry and dealing with the issues of endogamy basically makes it so that, everyone who's Jewish is going to share a little bit of DNA, even if your most recent ancestry was well beyond the genealogical solvability, like hundreds of years. And because of that, I'll get messages from DNA matches where it's like, look, there's no way we're ever going to figure out how we're related, because we may not be related within the past 500 years. It may be even more distant than that. And, they send you a message like, hey, is there any way you know how we're related? Or even like, with common names in the family, just to relate to more people than just people with Jewish ancestry. But like, imagine having one of your ancestral lines being a Smith family, and then you have matches that are sharing 12 centimorgans with you on one segment who are like, oh, well, I have Smith in my family too. You think we're related? I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. I try to respond to either side. I'm also working on my sister-in-law's tree, and some of her family have messaged me. I have to be honest and tell them that I'm working on her family too. Yeah. Let's see. Anna, all my maternal matches always end up talking to me, as my maternal uncle doesn't talk to any DNA relatives. And that happens too. I've gotten cousins of mine to do DNA testing. They give me access to their accounts, and then they're like, I don't have any interest in doing anything else with it, but run wild. So thanks for the advice. DNA match quality 5.9%, 416 centimorgans, shared DNA 20 shared segments, 74.6 centimorgan large segment. Oh, okay. Mom Pafelski, was this your question? Okay, I'm trying to see. That's what my heritage guessed it was, 400. Okay, so if this was your question, and you gave us the segments, let's get even more cool with it. We're going to do seg CM. So let's see, where was it? Cha-cha-cha-cha. Oh, I have it on screen. Okay. We have 416 centimorgans across 20 shared. So 20. And we are looking at half first cousin group. Strongest being first cousin once removed, but half first cousin group is definitely up there. And then let's see what the shared centimorgan project says. Oh, there we go. So 416. Oh, not what I meant. 416. Okay, so yeah, I mean 416 basically kind of all falling within that same range. I mean, you really are pretty close. It's definitely understandable why half first cousin is going to be one of the top things. Now let's see. Let's go back to your question. So okay, let's see. Where was it? Mother's father. And then he had was it a son or yeah, it was a son. Okay. So basically what I was trying to figure out was, would we expect any sort of an X chromosome match here? Which I actually, now that I think about it, I don't think MyHeritage even gives you X chromosome DNA data. But if you did have it in terms of the X chromosome, if it's your mother's father who then had a son, there would be no X chromosome shared because your mom got an X chromosome from her father, whereas your half uncle would have gotten a Y chromosome, and they wouldn't share any X chromosome because they'd have different mothers. So if you do share X chromosome DNA in a significant amount, then there's a question mark in, is it truly that? But yeah, I mean, from what you're telling me with it being 416, the 20 segment part, it is pushing it more towards the first cousin once removed. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean the other thing that, well, no, actually that probably wouldn't help at that distance. So yeah, I mean the biggest thing really at this point is just, see what your other cousins are matching this half first cousin at, and then plot it and what are the odds map, and that should hopefully give you a much stronger answer of if you're on the right path. So hi, I've arrived a bit late, but at least I could catch the live. I'm from Hungary and would like to know which company is best for Central or Eastern Europe. Now, I'm going to answer this from a genealogical standpoint in the sense of it's not really much about the admixture percentages. It's more about the DNA matches. And with that, you're going to want to test at MyHeritage. MyHeritage for years has put a lot of money into having distribution centers all throughout the world. And while they aren't the largest database, the fact that they put so much effort into having these distribution centers around the world means that they have a larger database of non-English speaking world matches than elsewhere. Because when you go to Ancestry, 23andMe, or Family Tree DNA, or even Living DNA, your large majority are going to be from what I like to call the English-speaking world countries. So the US, Canada, UK, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, obviously, South Africa and New Zealand, not quite as much. Australia, a bit more, and Canada kind of in line with Australia from what I can tell, but, US and UK being the real big ones and US being the biggest. But with MyHeritage, especially in terms of Eastern European and South American, I find no one contends with the DNA matches. So in terms of that, MyHeritage, if you're really just looking for the admixture percentage stuff and you really don't care about the DNA matches and expanding your tree, MyHeritage does have a lot of issues with their admixture that, basically I hear from more people complaining about their MyHeritage admixture not matching what they know about their family tree than any other company. But they are also going to be rolling out a whole new admixture soon. I forgot exactly when it was. They announced it last week at Rootstack that one of their many big announcements, they're rolling out a whole new admixture, which I know a lot of people have been hoping for a new one for a while. So it'll be interesting to see what that comes out as. But it'll also be interesting to see if they finally release a white paper, because that is something that we have wanted for a long time from them, which is the breakdown of how they're coming to all of that stuff. So that would be the answer, really, is MyHeritage. But I guess if you're not really focused that much on the DNA matching side of things and it's just about the percentages, maybe I'd probably say maybe Ancestry, because then you can download your Ancestry results and then upload it to MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA, so you can at least get your matches from that sort of thing. But none that I really could say like, oh, that one's the best that's a percentage wise. Team ADHD here. DX in the 70s diagnosed. All right. Oh, it looks like we have, okay, yeah, John, I would say MyHeritage. Karma, MyHeritage. All right, yeah. All right, so a lot of people cheering on being ADHD. Yes, I ran out of characters. I have matches that read my message on Ancestry and do not reply, although I always state that the relation is distant so that they do not get scared thinking that I'm adoptee. Yeah, when I see that, where if I see they've read it and they don't respond, I'll usually wait a week or so and then kind of send a follow-up, just in the thought of, I know I've read messages where I'm on the go and it's like, oh, cool, I need to respond to this, and then I just never get back to it. During Roots Tech, had two people message me from the same family line but different branches, line that I'd never heard from before. Pleasantly surprised, we're still messaging back and forth. That's good. That's good. What do you think about 23andMe's Neanderthal guesses? I'm in the 98th percentile. I know it's just a teensy tiny piece of DNA. Just wondering your thoughts. I honestly don't know. I get this question every once in a while about the Neanderthal DNA, or the Neanderthal DNA, excuse me. And I've never really focused on it much because I don't really find it has much genealogical relevance. But from my understanding from people who do work in archaeology and work in genetics and have an understanding of both worlds, that there is some validity to it. But I couldn't really answer that confidently, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm kind of like with John Tyner. Personally, I ignore the Neanderthal bit. It's like a lot of the tests. It's more fun than actually useful. Shelby, I had surgery last year and thought I'd spend my recovery time tracing back my family. Went to the LDS, ran Ancestry site, and had 3 of my 4 lines traced back at least 500, one almost 1,000 years. Yeah, so that's Family Search. The Family Search website, the Family Search Family Tree, which is another one of the collaborative family trees. In my opinion, it's my least favorite of the collaborative family trees, Genie being my favorite by far, WikiTree being a very close second, and then Family Search being much further down. But part of that is, in my opinion, Family Search doesn't do as good of a job of, I guess you could say, policing their world family tree, which is very necessary when you have something that's, anyone can go in and edit, basically. And so it's like Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a very, very intense bureaucratic process of how things are done. And that's kind of what's needed with some of these trees. And so WikiTree does it a little differently than Genie, but I think both do very good jobs overall. There are some errors that still pop through, and no site's ever going to be perfect. But with Family Search, it definitely feels that it's much more Wild West family tree. So, okay, let's jump to the next. Question. So we're gonna get to this one, which was kind of an interesting one. So this one, president of the tribe of Judah. I also a Jewish guy, but the thing is, I'm 97% Yemenite Jew, 1.6% Ashkenazi Jew, and 1.3 Iberian. Am I the newest Jewish king? Just kidding. I'm guessing before we go on, they've tested MyHeritage, because as far as I know, MyHeritage is the only one that has Yemenite Jewish, although maybe Family Tree DNA does. I can't remember. If anyone knows, post in the comments, but I'm pretty confident this is likely MyHeritage. So 97% Yemenite, 1.6% Ashkenazi, 1.3% Iberian is what I'm assuming they're saying here. First of all, I wanted to make you aware of another group that exists and does not belong to the Jews Sephardic. So they're talking about the Yemenite Jewish community, which I honestly do not know a whole lot about. I'm not going to pretend like I do. I know very little about them. And in fact, I actually messaged Sam Aronow right before I went live just to ask him, like, did you ever do a video on the community? Because if there was anyone who would have an amazing video that, would probably highlight things in a really good way, it'd be Sam. But he said he hadn't done one. I don't think he really has plans to do one. But part of it was he said that he did discuss the community in a few of his various videos. And that basically the way he described it was the community wasn't quite as off the beaten path as one would make it seem to be, like, unique enough, I guess. So he referenced the community in his specials on India, Ethiopia, Maimonides, and the First Aliyah. So if you do want to learn a bit more about some of those. Oh, I'm not showing that. Okay, good. I was like, I hope I'm not showing my private chat stuff with Sam right now, but no, it was good. It was good. So if you do want to learn a bit more, watch some of that stuff. But it is always good to know a bit of the history if you don't know it when you're trying to analyze these percentages, because it plays into what we would expect. So going back to the question, secondly, I've wondered about this a lot. I know that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, community in Yemen lived in isolated and distant villages. So the probability that I have an Ashkenazi gene is illusory. So I asked, could this represent the common gene of our earliest ancestors? These results were exciting for me, that for thousands of years of exile, there is in my blood the continuation of the earliest Jews from the beginning of the exile. So the answer is, to this part, maybe. There could be a few possibilities going on. I haven't seen enough people of Yemenite Jewish descent who've done DNA testing to be able to confidently say, this is actually really common to get these small percentages of Ashkenazi Jewish, but it is possible that it is a just representation of the difficulty of deciphering between Jewish groups. And this is something I've talked about a lot with these videos, especially with questions about, getting these small percentages of Ashkenazi Jewish or being Ashkenazi Jewish and getting other readings and, like, what's going on. And it really could just be coming down to the fact that there is just so much commonality of the Jewish genes that they're, that's why it's coming out as 1 per 6%, which doesn't necessarily mean, that's coming directly from the Jews, the earliest Jews who were exiled, where, you go back in time and your DNA is going to match up perfectly at that 1.6% with them. But it could be a variation of it could be even much more recent. So the other thing to consider too is, along with that idea of that it's not as easy to decipher the different Jewish groups, getting the 1.3% Ashkenazi along with 1.3% Iberian also brings in the question of, if this does represent not necessarily more distant ancestry, but something more recent, could it be actually representative of a possible Sephardic Jewish ancestor? Because just because it says Ashkenazi, knowing these DNA tests truly have a difficult time deciphering between the Jewish groups, that means it could also be Sephardi, or could be something else. And in all honesty, I don't know much about the Yemenite community, so I don't know if there was a large flow of people from Iberia to Yemen. Obviously, with the Umayyad Caliphate and the history of North Africa and the Middle East and in Iberia, it's not necessarily the most surprising, but it is certainly, I guess, a bit more surprising to see than the Ashkenazi Jewish necessarily. So there is no really distinct answer with this. It's really, well, yes, there are a few possibilities with it, and it's just a matter of building out things further. So considering the few possibilities, let's say that, okay, there's a possibility that this is coming from a more recent ancestor. And if that's the case, well, then we need to look at this. What is the percentage that we're going to expect of ancestry from those certain ancestors. And so fourth great grandparents is going to be our closest to what we would expect at 1.5625%. Could be more distant, could be more recent, but if that's coming from one recent Ashkenazi ancestor who somehow made their way into the Jewish community of Yemen, and then you descend from that person, you'd be finding them at about a fourth great grandparent level. Well, assuming that you're about my age and your family generations are similar to mine, someone who would be a fourth great grandparent would be someone born in the late 1700s or early 1800s. So, looking at the history of the Yemen community, was it an uncommon occurrence for someone who would be Ashkenazi to end up in the Yemen community? Because that's basically what that question comes down to. But then also considering that 1.3% Iberian, is that something separate? Is that also something that's just kind of a difficulty of reading the DNA for the Yemenite Jewish community? For some reason, it makes it seem Iberian. Or, like I said before, is that Ashkenazi and Iberian coming from one singular ancestor who might be Sephardi? And so then we're looking at maybe more of a 3% concept if that's the case. And so with 3%, we're going to then be looking at about third or fourth great grandparents, because as you can see now on the screen, third great grandparents, 3.125%. So now we're looking at something a little bit different. So if we're looking at, recent Ashkenazi ancestor, probably someone coming in, or someone born late 1700s, early 1800s. If we're thinking maybe it's a Sephardi ancestor, then maybe it actually is more third great grandparent, which then is early 1800s, mid 1800s when they were born. But either way, either way that you go, if it is coming from a recent ancestor, a singular recent ancestor, then you're probably going to be looking 1750s to 1850s in your family tree. And if you are able to identify every single ancestor of yours that's a third and fourth great grandparent, and you see none that are possibly Sephardi or Ashkenazi, then maybe it's not quite there. But obviously it could be even more distant, maybe a fifth great grandparent, maybe a sixth great grandparent. And that's where a lot of the difficulty with this stuff comes in, is that it's hard to disprove and prove. Either way, you're often just left with, well, the evidence seems to indicate this is the most likely answer. And that's why we have the genealogical proof standard as a way to try to gauge, our genealogical conclusions. How actually, proven are they, or how much more proof is needed. So hopefully all of that was helpful. This question was reviewed during the professional genealogist reacts live stream on March 12th, 2024. Boop. Doop. And let's check chat. Okay. Drea, woo, you made it. Welcome. Glad you made it. I started at such a weird time today, but actually having not the biggest crowd, but we're staying on the higher end in the 50s and 60s, so that's good to see. Darius T, hi Jarrett, my Bosnian friend had his father and maternal uncle take 23andMe DNA kits. His father got 66% Bosnian and 32% Eastern Europe. I believe you talked about this before, but how come such a large percentage is that vague? Well, considering that you're coming from Bosnia, or I guess technically it's Bosnia and Herzegovina. Did I say that right? Let's just pull up a map to make things easy. All right, we're going to try Google Earth. Last time I think I tried Google Earth on stream, it was glitching out. It couldn't handle it. All right, okay, Google Earth. So Bosnia. Come on. Show us the names. Come on. Okay. maybe it doesn't like me. All right, we're gonna do Google Maps, because I just want to keep the names up there for everybody so they can actually, not everyone is that great with geography, so try to make it somewhat easier for everybody. Okay. So okay. All right. So obviously with Bosnia and Herzegovina, you're dealing with an area that has had the lines jump nonstop. And with that, you've also had population flow that's been nonstop. I mean, just considering the past 100 years, that's the story. But we also, considering autosomal DNA, need to consider the past 300, 400 years, even further, 500, 600 years. The conventional thinking with these DNA tests is basically it's confident out to about a fifth great grandparent level. Once you get out that far, though, then you start running into ancestors where they may be truly your ancestors, but you may not have inherited any DNA from them, just because with the randomness of recombination from every generation, certain DNA ancestry just fizzles out. You just don't have it in your DNA, but it is truly part of your family trait. And so even though these tests are only considered to about that distance, with fifth great grandparents being about 1700s or so, that's why you often hear about 300 years or so for a lot of this stuff. But you'll also hear a lot of people saying 300 to 500 years, because even though you don't necessarily have DNA from all of your fifth great grandparents, you still do have a lot of DNA from the majority of them. And it's only as you get further and further out that it starts to become a minority of that amount of ancestors that you truly get DNA from, because I mean, you start getting back far enough, you have thousands upon thousands of ancestors. So that's a big part of the consideration. So when it comes to Eastern Europe, which I know Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's the Balkans, and there are Balkan readings specifically, which your dad is getting 66% Bosnian and 32% Eastern European. So, you are getting that specific Bosnian, but with the other part, basically, you're probably just that just represents the ancestry that you have that has been the population flow from all throughout Eastern Europe, and possibly even all up into the Baltic states too. I mean, just thinking of the history of the Russia, Lithuanian, Poland, the Lithuania-Poland Commonwealth, Galicia, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and just all the different entities throughout the world, and just the population flow. That's really why you're getting such a large percentage, or your father's getting such a large percentage of that Eastern European. Now, another part of it could also be that with your dad doing a DNA test, I'm guessing you haven't had your grandparents tested, his parents, even just one, which if you can do that, then you can phase the DNA. But without phasing the DNA, that causes even more confusion. So let's pull up a thing. I think I spoke about phasing DNA in the new reaction I posted yesterday. But so this is an animation I use a lot in my videos that I made. So it is coming up, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, so basically, here's you, and at every spot in your DNA, you have base pairs. So A, T, C, or G, and then these DNA things go through it. Oh yeah, I must. Okay, they go through it and they try to figure out, okay, what is which one's coming from mom, which one's coming from dad, because one of these letters came from mom, one came from dad, but they don't know which is which. So then they make a guess, right? So they've made this guess, and it's like, okay, well, this is what we think it is. But then when you have one of your parents test, and now you can phase the results. So they can go through it and go, oh, that's actually what they shared with that parent there. And so then after phasing, you can see, oh, these changes of letters. Well, if both of your parents are coming from a Bosnian, or I guess both of your grandparents, your father's parents are coming from a Bosnian ancestry, then it could just be that they just are having such a hard time deciphering, what segments what or which, but they can tell, okay, well, we can't really, it's hard to figure out exactly which one it is, but we can tell this is Eastern Europe. So if you get your parents to DNA test and then you phase the results, you may see a very different reading. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Joseph Van Praag. Hi, Jarrett Ross. I got my heritage results, 89.4% Ashkenazi Jewish, 4.6% Middle Eastern, 4.5% North African, and 1.5% Nigerian. Any insights on the Nigerian ancestry? This is actually going to be a lot of assumptions on my part in answering this, but it might be very interesting. based on your name being Van Praag, or Van Praag as a lot of people would say it, but I'm going by the assumption that it's Dutch. And if you do come from Dutch ancestry, meaning you come from Dutch Jewish ancestry, there's also the possibility that you're coming from a Dutch Sephardic ancestry. And the Sephardic community of Amsterdam and the Netherlands in general, but the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam specifically, had very strong ties to Suriname and what was known as Jodensvan, which is actually one of the blights, I guess you could say, on Jewish history. So, one of these things that it's difficult to talk about in the sense that, it should be discussed, but difficult to talk about in the sense that there are a lot of people who are very racist, very anti-Semitic, who use the whole story of, Jewish involvement in the slave trade as some sort of, all Jews were involved in the slave trade sort of thing. I'm sure people have seen stuff about it, but there were Jews involved in the slave trade, as many populations were involved. But in Suriname, there was Jodensvan, which was a very well-known community, Jewish community, which had a very, very strong history of enslaved people. But also part of that history involved some of those descendants of enslaved people becoming free and actually becoming a part of the Jewish community. And they're even noted in documentation of, they would call them mulatto. Obviously a very common term that we hear in the U.S. for African-American ancestry. So assuming that you are coming from a Dutch Jewish background and a Sephardic Jewish Dutch background, this 1.5% Nigerian could actually be indicative of enslaved ancestry from, it wasn't just Jodensvan. There was also the Jewish community in Jamaica. They were known to have slaves as well. I don't think they had any, I don't know for sure, but there were also communities in Curacao, and St. Martin's and St. Thomas, I think, and a few other places. So, let's see. I'm Dutch and my grandmother is Portuguese. Her name is De La Parra. Now, when you say Portuguese, you mean Portuguese Jewish, or do you mean she was actually like from Portugal Portuguese? Because if it's from Portugal Portuguese, then it doesn't really fit in this story. But if it's Portuguese is in the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam, then yes, which I know that there were De La Parras in Amsterdam, in that community. So if you want to say the name of your actual one of the older ancestors, I can probably pull up the De La Parra tree. And I do have ancestry in Suriname. So, well, yeah. So, I will say this does not mean for sure that is where that 1.5% Nigerian is coming from. I have seen people with Western Sephardic ancestry, which I have the same. We're probably cousins. I'm sure with just a little bit of work, I could figure out exactly how you and I are related. Actually, let's see if I could figure it out right now. So yeah, Vanya Amsterdam of no or of neat. Okay, let's see. So De La Parra, and then see. I wonder if you're in here. Okay, my mother is not Dutch. Okay, so that if she's not Dutch, Well, when you say not Dutch, do you mean she's from Portugal or she's Portuguese Jewish living in? Because that's basically the, if she's coming from the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam, very possible this is the story where that 1.5% Nigerian may be coming from. If not, and she is coming from Portugal, the grandma is from my Dutch dad's side. So yeah, so it's certainly possible if you do have Dutch Sephardic ancestry. Honestly, just having Dutch Jewish ancestry, it's very possible that there's some, that you still have it too. Just Dutch Ashkenazi, that is. But for most of the time that the Dutch Jews were in Amsterdam, basically late 1500s, early 1600s is when you have most of the Ashkenazi Jews showing up. But the Sephardic Jews start really showing up in the late 1500s. And then there's not a lot of mixture between the communities in terms of marriage and having children. It happens, but it was very rare and it was a scandal. And it wasn't until kind of post early 1800s, after, Napoleon rule in the Netherlands, the wonderful Ludwig. But it wasn't really until after that it started to become much more common for Ashkenazi and Sephardi to kind of mix. So lots of interesting stuff there, but that could be where that's coming from. But it also could be, 1.5%, and it being my heritage could just be a misread or some sort of a noise in a sense. Snack. Hello, Jared Ross. I got my heritage results recently. Greek and South Italian, 37.5%. East European, 20.1%. Baltic, 9.3%. Who am I? Okay. I mean, you're somebody who has a mixture of European ancestry with some other stuff in it. I mean, it's, I don't know, that's the thing with these tests. It's not like, here's the percentages. Now, what am I? Because it could be a lot of different things. I mean, it could be that you just have a super mixed background, or it could be that you're coming from some sort of population group that just has all of this, crazy stuff going on. Or maybe you have two parents that have enough of a different background that it's coming up like this. So yeah, I know that my mom is Crimean Italian, but I know almost nothing about my father. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's really not much to glean off of this. If your mom was Crimean Italian, really. Italians of Crimea. Interesting. So Crimean, like living in Ukraine, Crimea Peninsula, or on the eastern shores of eastern Crimea. Okay. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of that, you can certainly tie your Greek and South Italian and the Eastern European and some of the other stuff to it. But I guess if you don't know who your father is, with the North African, Nigerian, and the Middle Eastern coming in, that's the stuff that would seemingly, if you're, if one parent is Crimean Italian, so mostly Italian or Eastern European is what we would be thinking, then the other parent may be representing this other stuff, meaning that, you're possibly looking at someone in North Africa or the Middle East or something, and, with Italian ancestry, and I guess also Crimean connection, there's a lot of possibilities to it. So certainly makes sense though, Southern Italian Greek person ending up with someone from North Africa or Middle East. I mean, those areas, even though they seem kind of far apart in the sense of, Africa, Middle East, and Europe, they're really not that far apart. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome, Joseph. Who am I? Whomever you want to be. Okay, let's get to the next question. So yeah, we just did that one. Okay. 100% Ashkenazi, or is something else going on? I took DNA tests on myheritage.com. I know it's bad for ethnicity estimates because it has smaller population sample, but it was more affordable than anything else, and I was getting illogically excited about this DNA test. So I took it. As far as I know, I'm only Ashkenazi Jewish. I got 93.2% Ashkenazi Jewish and 6.8% Northwestern European. I uploaded my DNA to mytrueancestry.com and paid for the footman level. All right, well, I can tell you already, my true ancestry is not going to give you anything genealogically relevant that's going to give you a more narrow focus and a better idea of what you're dealing with. Probably going to cause you more confusion, but let's continue. According to this website, I'm matching with a Crusader or two, which seems to confirm the Northwestern European. Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. According to my true ancestry, I have only a small genetic distance from some Jewish samples in Erfurt and samples in medieval Italy and Ancestry, and the Byzantine Empire, and somewhat larger 12.46 distance from 16th century descendants of Muslims in Granada, Spain. However, I paid $20 to upload my DNA to Family Tree DNA, and they gave me almost 99% Ashkenazi, around 1% Sephardic, and around 0.1 or 0.2% Middle Eastern. What I'm wondering is this all just Ashkenazi? Are the SNPs I share with Germans, French people, Middle Eastern Jews, and Sephardic Jews common in Ashkenazi Jews as well? And they randomly gave me this. If so, does it tell me anything about what parts of Northern/Eastern Europe my ancestors were from 800 years ago? So right off the bat, all of this stuff that they did doesn't have any genealogical relevance. I mean, we're talking about ancient samples of people who lived thousands of years ago. And from what we've known through both from a mathematical standpoint and a genetic standpoint is when you look a couple of thousand years back, the amount of ancestry you have that is outside of your considered ancestry. So for Ashkenazi Jewish, you go back 2,000 years. Yeah, you're probably going to see a large majority of ancestors who were some sort of a Jewish relation in a sense, I guess you could say, but you're also going to find ancestors from all over the place. And, just think about how many people go back a couple hundred years and find an ancestor they weren't expecting. But the more you go back, the further you go back in time, the more ancestors you have, and the more likely that it is that you come from an ancestry that's outside of what you expect. So even if you're Ashkenazi Jewish, you find some Crusaders from a couple, 1,000 years ago, even if it's, like 1,000 years ago, there's a big possibility that you're somehow related to them. And it's not, yeah. So a lot of this stuff, this is not, I never recommend anything like My True Ancestry or, I think Genome Leak is one of them, or just, these other sites where their focus is the deep ancestral, samples and things like that, which it is interesting. And if you have an interest in it that way, go for it. But if your interest is largely just trying to figure out your ancestry through these percentages and stuff, you're just making it more confusing. And that's one of the biggest issues with the admixtures is that it's pushed so much by the companies, it's advertised so much by the companies, and then people really dig into that, thinking that somehow they're gonna, the more they dive in and the more sites they look at the percentages and this and that, they're gonna get a better idea. And really, it's just gonna confuse you more because these ethnicity estimates are just estimates. There's a lot of issues with them, and they're the least reliable part of these DNA tests. Which then, because it's the most advertised and most talked about part of DNA tests, is why we see people going, oh, DNA tests are a fraud. DNA tests are a scam. It's like, I know for a fact they aren't a scam. I've proven it many, 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 many times over the past 11 years that I've been doing DNA testing, proving stuff, helping adoptees find their families, connecting people with family members that they haven't seen forever, solving crimes, identifying unknown human remains. And so that's the power, but the mixture stuff is not. And this is a perfect question to go and show why. And I mean, this person may have also gone to GEDmatch and then used the GEDmatch calculators, and then they get on them, Ancestry, and then they get on the 23andMe, and then they, and they just add more and more data of these percentages, and then it's just like, well, I don't know. So, okay, now with all of that said, let's just get back to the meat of this. I got 93.2% Ashkenazi, 6.8% Northwestern European. Now, I personally don't see Northwestern European coming in as a common thing for people with Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, even on my heritage. So that does stand out a bit. But it is interesting that for family tree DNA, they aren't picking up any Northwestern Europeans. There is a certainly big question mark of, is that 6.8% Northwestern European true, or is it some sort of a misread, or just a really big percentage of noise for some reason. So it may be worthwhile to look at some other calculators to see if that Northwestern European is coming up, but nothing really beyond that necessarily. And really with the mindset of, if I do see, okay, we've gone to family tree DNA, they're not seeing any Northwestern European, so my confidence is much lower that this is a true segment of Ancestry. But then, let's say you do get a test from MyHeritage, and then they give you a very similar percentage of Northwestern European. To me, then that's indicative, okay, we're looking at something very, very possibly likely. So then we need to consider, what are the percentages we expect for the different ancestries? And so with 6.8%, we're looking at most likely a second great grandparent. Could be a great grandparent you really didn't inherit that much from, or could be a third great grandparent that you did inherit a lot from. But the biggest thing being that it's about a second great grandparent. So now the goal would be, build out your family tree to every single second and third great grandparent to try to identify them. And if that 6.8% Northwestern European is truly coming from one recent ancestor, which would probably be more likely the case than multiple distant ancestors, just because of the history of Jews in Northwestern Europe. But 6.8%, you may be able to, once you get to second great grandparents, all of a sudden you see a grandparent where it's like, okay, that is not a Jewish person. That is definitely somebody else. And then all of a sudden you've figured out where that's coming from. But then on the flip side, let's say that, you get an ancestry test and it comes back similar to family tree DNA, where it's basically like, yeah, you're almost all Ashkenazi Jewish, or even maybe 100% Ashkenazi Jewish. That happens, and it's like, okay, it's probably because MyHeritage is just having some really bad misread for some reason, and still a lot less likely. But the thing with reading these other admixtures is, it's really just to get an idea of, is it going to be worth the time to try to identify all the second and third great grandparents with this in mind? Or is it so unlikely that, it may not be worth the time? But I mean, that's the thing, is you could also just say, you know what? I do want to identify all my second and third great grandparents, because that's something a lot of, that's a big goal for a lot of people, is to do that. Right now I've identified all of my great grandparents, and I'm still trying to identify one of my paternal great grandmother's parents, and I know almost nothing about her. Even with all the DNA testing and everything I've done, mitochondrial DNA testing, cousins testing, testing on all the different sites and all of that, still a big question mark. So, you may run into that, especially because, Ashkenazi Jewish, not uncommon to have that sort of a brick wall. The other thing to consider too, do you have cousins who have done DNA testing, or other relatives? Most especially older generations. So not just older age, but older generations. So, aunts, uncles, grandparents, things like that. As opposed to, like first cousins or siblings or nieces or nephews or children or stuff like that. Basically, the older the generation you go, the better the results you get. So let's say that 6.8% truly is representative of Northwestern European ancestry, and it's from your dad's side. Well, if your dad tests or one of his siblings test, then you would probably see an even bigger percentage of Northwestern European. But basically, if you get these other relatives to test and you're seeing they are also getting Northwestern European, and even better on other sites outside of MyHeritage, because obviously, as you say, MyHeritage is known for not having the best ethnicity estimates, although it doesn't really have to do as much about them having a smaller population sample or a smaller database. It's more to do with the fact that they make assumptions that not all other companies are necessarily as confident about. So, like defining certain population groups, a lot of other companies don't feel they have enough data to just specifically define Sephardic Jewish, but MyHeritage does it. So it's kind of that sort of thing of like, they're a little bit riskier with it, I guess you could say. But yeah, so getting, more relatives tested could be helpful too. So a lot of possible ways to go with it. Yeah, I think that should be good. This capitalize my T. This question was reviewed during the professional genealogist reacts live stream on March 12th, 2024. The year of our Lord, 2024. Okay. All right, let's see what's chat saying. My true ancestry exposed. Yes, Scott, the estimates change all the time. And the reason they change is just because they've done more testing and they've figured out, oh, we actually are much more confident in the results this way. And so with the companies that release white papers, which MyHeritage does not, but like 23andMe does. So let's pull up one of those white papers. With the white papers, you actually get the information of how are they coming up with this stuff. So they have publications that you can look through, like the actual, all the stuff, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, but they also have the white papers. And so, there's a lot of stuff to, what they put out, because it's not just the estimates or the, DNA stuff. It's also, health stuff, the wellness, the, Neanderthal stuff. So ancestry composition. And the biggest thing, which I talk about this all the time, is precision and recall. Let's just jump right to it. And so with precision and recall, it's basically just a statistical measure of how well, all right, it's going to take longer than I thought. How well can they actually read it? So, first you can see, like with 23andMe, you can see the reference population sample composition, what actually makes it up. How much of it is specific to 23andMe, how much of it is public, and how many of that sample is, the total. So that kind of gives you an idea too. But even better, we have the precision and recall. And so it's this stuff, the precision and recall, that gives us the best idea of how good are they reading it. Basically, when they do new studies and they put things through these statistical measurements, if they're getting better precision and recall, they're probably going to want to go with that. Because, like, look at this. Mongolian and Manchuria. We have a precision of 38.1 and a recall of 91.6. And then if we're looking at the standard deviation of 0.8, then it changes slightly. So you can see how we have, some of these are super confident. Ashkenazi Jewish, super confident. Eastern European, not quite as confident. Still up there in the 80s, but, not quite as confident. Then, we look at all of Europe, Northwestern Europe. Oh, yeah, we're pretty good about that. Britain and Ireland, decent, but not quite as good. Central Western Europe, not even worse. So depending on, whether you're expecting an ancestry and not getting it, or you're getting an ancestry that you didn't expect, that's where precision and recall really comes into help. So pull up some visual aids to help explain this, because I always have trouble explaining this without it. So with precision and recall, they're looking at those two things. One is looking at, of all the people that we expected to have this, how many are actually getting it? And then the other is, of all the people that are getting it, how much actually have it? So precision, how many retrieved items are relevant? So you can see it's the true positives over here over all positives. So basically precision is, of all the things that we labeled as this one thing, how many truly were that? So going back, we have our precision. And so sub-Saharan African, of all the people that did DNA testing and they were and they were read sub-Saharan African, only 1% of those people didn't actually have sub-Saharan African. They were known false positives. But then for the recall, 98.6. What recall is that's the how many relevant items are retrieved. So how many true positives out of all the known positives, or what the positives that you'd expect. So for this, of all of the people that did the DNA test where we would expect them to have African ancestry, only 1.4% didn't actually get it. So for someone with sub-Saharan African ancestry, they're going to be getting it's very likely that they're going to be getting what they expect. But then let's jump down over here to, we have Egypt other, right? So for Egypt other, out of all of the people that are getting Egypt, only 74.1% of them are known positives, and the other 25.9% are known false positives. So they should not have come up. So if you get Egypt and you weren't expecting it, you have a higher possibility that, well, you really aren't supposed to be getting Egypt. You're just a false positive. But then it does have a pretty good recall. So of all of the people that they tested, that they were like, okay, we expect for them to get Egyptian or this Egypt other, 90.2% of them got it, but 9.8% didn't. So if you're expecting to get Egyptian ancestry, then you do have a higher likelihood that they're going to read that well. But if you aren't expecting it and you get the Egyptian, that confidence that, okay, I truly have Egyptian isn't as high, because you do have that precision number. So they're trying to bring that up. But then you have some, like, look at this, Northern Asia. I mean, those numbers are, I mean, you have so many people getting Northern Asian, Mongolian, and Manchuria who shouldn't be getting it. But of the people that do expect to get it, they are getting pretty good numbers. So it's, they're able to tell, okay, these people are Mongolian and Manchurian, but then they can't figure out necessarily the other, of everyone they read. Are they going to be able to confidently say that they have it, or are they going to say it and there's a higher possibility, like with this, that you really should be getting it? So yeah, okay, let's let's jump into interesting result from my DNA health report having trace amounts of European Jewish. HBOC syndrome, which is common of certain ethnicities. About 1 in 40 people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent have HBOC syndrome. And that is one of the interesting things. There are certain things that they can tie to populations beyond just genetics. Obviously, with the medical stuff, that's a big part of it. It's impressive how accurate you are about the slaves my ancestors had in Suriname. Yeah, I mean, it's a history I study a lot, because I study a lot about the Dutch Jewish communities and stuff like that. My heritage also indicates extra genetic group Suriname Paramaribo. Paramaribo, I never say it right, in the Netherlands. So that's, makes sense. Makes sense. Drea, speaking of your old work, Jarrett, any tips on how best to be helpful to investigative genetic genealogists? Someone whose DNA I managed matched with a John Doe, so we're hoping to assist on that now. Now, all of the cases that I worked were law enforcement cases, which meant that it was all hidden. And actually, all Doe cases should be hidden as far as I know, because they're all put through the GenMatch Pro or through Gene by Gene's system, which is supposed to mark it in a way where people can't see it. But sometimes there's target testing done, where basically, we're able to figure it out to a certain point, but we can't really figure out quite. So we suggest people to target test to the law enforcement for various reasons. So sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, well, we have this one match and we're pretty confident it's on the maternal side, but we're not 100% sure, and we're not 100% sure which part of the maternal side. So we suggest getting a target test from, a cousin from the maternal grandparents and a cousin from the maternal grandfather and a cousin from the maternal grandmother. Or, it can vary depending on what we suggest. And those target tests sometimes pop up. So I wonder if that's the case. But from my standpoint, when it comes to the investigative stuff, all of my work, we did not involve any people unless law enforcement went and did that themselves. So there were a few people that I did hear from in some of the cases that I was working, who law enforcement went to, got the information, and the law enforcement agency we were working for said, yes, we want you to talk to these people and get the information. But that was very rare. So, I mean, the best way I could answer this is, for investigative genetic genealogy work, is if they do reach out to you, which maybe that is the case, maybe they reached out to you and, said something about that way. But just, answer answer their questions and give them the information that they need, and that's really it. Beyond that, maybe just the more kits that you manage that you can possibly make available for law enforcement, that's certainly going to help as well, because who knows, maybe one of the kits that you aren't opted in for law enforcement, if that kit were opted in, that could be the kit that helps them figure it out. It's kind of saddening that Jarrett, with all the tricks and tools he has, still has recent-ish ancestors he can't track down. I agree. It's so tough. But I mean, that's just, that's how it is sometimes. I mean, it's just, stuff gets lost to history, and you just don't have enough information that you need to solve it. Oh, whoa. What are you doing over here, screen? Okay, I think that's good. Okay. Could be multiple ancestors had some Northwest European in them, because one side of the family all came from England or something. I think you're talking about this question. Yeah, I mean, there are so many possibilities with things. I think that one's probably one of the lesser possible things, just because in my experience, you don't often see Northwestern European kind of being common amongst people with Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry. But it certainly could be possible that it's coming from multiple sides, but I don't think it's quite as likely. For all my years in this, I still have some unidentified, not too distant ancestors, but finding them would definitely not stop me from doing more genealogy. Yeah, there was a meme I made years ago that I think I've seen a few other people copy since then, which, it is what it is. But let me see if I can find it. Because it was one of those memes. Like I got into a little moment of making a lot of memes for a while, because I was especially trying to, for one, keep up with my Discord community, which was making a lot of really good memes, but also it seemed like a good way to really get some of the younger audience that you don't see as much in genealogy. Where maybe it's older than I thought. Let's see how far back. Oh, there it is. Okay. So yeah, are you sleeping? Yes, now shut up. Your family tree will never be finished. So that's, even if you identify those ancestors, once you identify them, well, now you need to identify their ancestors. So it's never ending. Yes, same here. Last update for Ancestry, my dad's estimate went up by 1%, was 59% previously. Well, I'm guessing that completely changed your entire hypothesis. Hopefully you didn't get too stuck. Sorry, the reason I say that, the family she's working on is called the Stuck family. Okay, let's see. Some chatting. Okay, Mungo. Oof, I'm in Thailand and wanting to test, not liking the recall numbers for ties. Yeah, the it really goes to show with the English speaking country tests. When you look at these, it's like, oh wow, yeah, there's definitely some stuff that, okay, it's gonna be a little worrisome of how's it gonna come out. But once you start looking at like European and stuff like that, it's not quite as bad. But yeah, like with Asia and Africa, those ones usually get some of the worst. Although part of it is, with the African results, you can see, at least sub-Saharan African, the breakdown isn't super nuanced. I mean, some of these things kind of make it seem a little nuanced, but West Africa sure is a lot more than just these countries. Granted, these countries make up a large majority of the little pockets of regions, but this is one of the issues a lot of people have with that stuff. But they're doing it in these not as granular breakdowns, because if they probably tried to do more granular breakdown, these numbers in the 90s and 80s and 70s probably drop really low, and all of them probably drop. So like with Asian, we can see with their Asian results. I mean, granted, Asia is Africa's large too. I don't know. But, with Asia, you can see they have much more breakdown for everything, but the numbers stay pretty high up for a large majority of it, but not all of it. And so because they are getting really granular with it, they're getting some of these population groups where, like Northern Asia, I mean, their regional reading has very low precision, pretty good recall though, but very low precision. And then that's coming out of that Mongolian Manchurian, but their Siberian is really strong. So it's like little pockets of stuff that isn't quite as good in the Asian readings, but that's, I think, mostly because they are trying to keep it as granular as possible. So yeah, it's it. So this is the kind of stuff that it's like, people really want to get into the admixture stuff and look at all these different admixture tests. And then it's like, well, did you look at the precision recall? No. Okay. But obviously if you're testing on MyHeritage, they do not have a white paper released that gives us that information. Got to start DNA testing the remains found in every tomb in the world. Yeah. Well, one thing that's going to be really interesting to see once it starts to become much more available are reconstructed genomes. Basically, people do DNA painting nowadays where, okay, I found all these DNA matches, and using those DNA matches, I can paint certain parts of my ancestry to, that's coming from this ancestor. Like that's the ancestor. They had this exact DNA at that spot. And so when you add up enough of that, you can start to actually figure out what their actual DNA was, especially if, you and siblings and cousins and all that are, you have a lot of people in one family tested. You can use all of how all these cousins are matching in their shared ancestry to start kind of deciphering where that DNA came from and then reconstructing your ancestral genomes. And over time, as more people DNA test and more genomes are reconstructed, I would hope that there may be some sort of a possible database created or some sort of an access given to these reconstructed genomes, because then all of a sudden it's not going to be perfect profiles, probably because there's going to be stuff missing and there's going to be errors, and it's just going to happen. But over time it's going to get better and better where you can actually figure it, okay, because I have all of my all these cousins tested and me and this and that, I can actually reconstruct my second great grandfather's genome. On top of that, artifact testing is going to become much more common. There's already artifact testing companies out there, To the Letter DNA, Keepsake DNA, which is also run by Intermountain Forensics, which also does forensic investigative genetic genealogy. But there's also new technology coming out that gives better DNA testing results for artifact testing. But artifact testing, you have very low amounts of DNA, you have very degraded DNA. And I mean, think about when you've done a DNA test, especially if you did the Ancestry DNA test or the 23andMe one, how much DNA did you have to give? You had to fill that thing up. Now, for Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage, they send you two swabs, two buccal swabs. So you swab the inside of your cheeks and then pop it in. But they need a lot of DNA. And even then, sometimes they have to send it back and have you send more sample because something happened. So when you're dealing with artifact DNA, you have even more issues. And so that's the biggest issue right now with that world, is trying to get artifact DNA tests done. It's very rare to get good results, but there's already new technology, new DNA testing stuff being used by investigative genetic genealogists. One of the biggest ones that I actually have a lot of experience on was Kintelligence. And with most DNA testing or most SNP DNA tests, you're testing 600,000 plus SNPs. With the Kintelligence kit, you're doing 10,230 SNPs, just over 1% of the typical autosomal SNP array tests. And we got viable results from profiles that couldn't be created through SNP array or whole genome sequencing because it was too degraded or too low. But we got viable profiles and we were able to solve cases. So some of those cases that we solved, let's see. So one of the cases that meant a lot to me in working on it, that was solved with the assistance of Kintelligence, was this one, the murder of Debbie Lynn Randall, murdered in 1972. And years and years and years, her murderer went unknown. And then it was through intelligence testing that we were able to get a viable profile and figure out that it was this William Rose. So this is just one example of intelligence being used. Another one was this one, a very interesting case. Let me make sure this is the right one. I'm pretty sure this is it, but yes. Okay. So this case, which was big headline news too, there were 3 girls in Indiana. They were attacked by this guy. All 3 of them had their throats cut, and they all survived. And the man went unknown for many, many years until through intelligence DNA testing, we got a viable profile. And so you can see DNA Labs International, the latest forensic technology available. And so right now, this is what's being used in forensic world and the investigative world, but eventually it'll probably make its way over into the into the consumer market. And then you're going to be able to, once it makes its way where consumers can send their artifacts to a company to get it intelligence tested, we're going to probably start to see even more ancestral profiles jumping up. So some interesting stuff to talk about. Yep, we got contacted by a police officer. Fingers crossed for an identification. It's complicated by an adoption. So many of these are. Oh, I've seen that one before. Didn't realize it was your creation. I don't know what I was talking about. Oh yeah, I guess you were talking about this one. Yeah, I came up with a whole bunch of memes. Some of them really caught on, and some of them did not. Like this one kind of caught on a bit. I like that one a lot. But like. Oh yeah, this one's a good one because I think we all feel that we all want to have the chromosome browser from Ancestry. So, and you can see this is October 2021. So, but yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I really do like about a little Discord community is that we have an entire channel just for memes, just for memes. Not all of them are genealogy based memes. Taking a quick look right now, but like we get, it's like some of them are just history based ones and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay. Did I mark this one already? Blair reviewed. Yes. Okay. All right, let's keep going through the chat. Which of your great grandmothers is the mystery woman? Could we help? I mean, I'll show you her, but we'll have to see if anyone can help because I've had a lot of people work on this and nobody's been able to crack the case. And obviously, I've had a lot of really, really high-end genealogists dive into this kind of stuff for me. And yeah. Oh, it won't. Oh, okay, I gotta. Pulling up the wiki tree of it. So this is my great grandmother, who we do not know. Part of it is the records we have for her have multiple possible maiden names. Fanny's a name, Frida's, or not just maiden names, but first names. Fanny, Frida, Frances, but we also find her as Jenny. I think in one of them or something like that. But then, we think it's Baruch. That's one of the things I heard. There was a record that said Brood. But I had some cousins on that side who said they thought it might have been Greenspan or something like that. And I don't know, just other stuff. And she, her granddaughter, my cousin, is the famous Jill St. John. It doesn't show it here, but yeah. So okay, yeah. So my cousin Jill St. John, famous actress, and this is her grandmother. And yeah, so I've tried to get, I've had other family members DNA tests. I've had different family members doing specific tests to try to, could we do mitochondrial to figure stuff out? And yeah, there's just a lot of difficulty with it, but we just know so little about her. But hey, if anyone can figure it out, more power to you. More power to you. Let's see. My friend from Bukovina is going to check archives in his grandparents' village. If he reaches a dead end, could the older archives be in Vienna since it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire? Very possibly. One of the big things to consider when you're doing research is what was the area that was the government in place when they lived there. And based on that information, could there be records held elsewhere by that? So this was a perfect example of, yeah, it very well could be. So you'll have to look and see. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we're getting up on 2 hours or so. Yeah, so excited for reconstructed genome stuff. That's going to be really exciting. My family is mostly of Irish and Scottish ancestry. Is there a test company that are more accurate in distinguishing between the two? My 23andMe had me at 95.2% British Isles and Ireland. I mean, kind of like I've been harping on with the admixtures, I honestly don't have a feeling really any way about one being better than the other. But the one thing I will say is the company that tries to give the most granular and nuanced results would be Living DNA, at least in terms of like British Isles and Irish ancestry. So that might be worthwhile, but personally, I think you're probably better off building out the family tree and figuring out your ancestry that way. Let's see. All right, I'm actually catching up. The meme. One of my friends was murdered in 1983. The case was solved last year using genetic genealogy. Very sorry to hear that you had a friend who was murdered, but happy to hear that they were able to solve the case at least. Just saw your comment about WPP, pirates, and aliens. Yeah. Let me see if I can find that one too. I think must be Sephardi. Yeah, I had a lot of memes that I was doing. Let me see if I can find some other good ones. Oh yeah, this getting ready for a new episode of Relative Race. Need a carton, a palette of tissues. So, all right. Okay, yeah. Where are we at? Oh, just under 2 hours. So, all right. Well, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it at this point. We've answered some pretty good questions so far. Had a lot of questions coming through chat today. Actually, had a pretty strong audience throughout the day. It's been kind of lower for a bit, so it's been kind of hovering more in the 50s and 60s, which is really good to see. So thank you everyone for the questions you submitted. If you have a question that you want answered on here, definitely post it on Reddit. I do these streams every week. So if you didn't realize, it's going to be every Tuesday. I was trying to do 2 p.m.-ish Eastern time every time, but I have not been able to keep that up. So we're just going to call it Tuesdays, afternoons on Tuesdays in the Eastern US. So post your questions on Reddit and all that fun stuff. Be sure to join the Discord group if you're not there. Lots of cool stuff going on there, especially if you want some of those more up-to-date memes. And then if you do want to have one-on-one consultations or things like that, definitely check out my Patreon. You can get that stuff through there. And eventually I'm working on getting a website set up and hopefully getting it so that people can hire me through the website and stuff for one-on-ones and maybe private client work. I don't know. We'll see. Thank you all for joining today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night or week or whatever it is. And I'll see you on Friday on the main channel, hopefully. Peace.